Hey YouTube, how is everybody doing? So in this quick video tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how you can create your own atmospheres for whatever track you're working on, whether it be pop or EDM or ambient, experimental, rock, anything. You know, you can always seem to find a place to put ambience, which is kind of cool. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ramble on a little bit to explain everything that's going on here, but I'll try to be as succinct as possible, so just bear with me. Let's listen to what we have going on here. So hopefully that gives you a general idea of what we're creating or what I'm going to be explaining here. First things first, we have an ambience group or bus here that has a bunch of processing on it, but let's go into the chop itself, which is just a sample of a pad that I pulled from a pack, and I've gone into slice mode and sliced it up manually. So every time you play a note within your MIDI here, it triggers one of these sample sections. So I created this little pattern here. You could probably go in and change the velocities and even add a little bit of a groove if you wanted to keep things a bit more human and interesting, but I did some processing to try to get that going. And you could also even think about, for an element like this or other elements within your ambience piece, creating something that is not exactly 4 bars and have it like loop throughout, so that you have a bit of like a polymeter, polyrhythm going on, and things keep evolving without you having to really do too much, because if you have stuff in 4/4 and then something else in a different time signature, you're going to get some interesting evolutions throughout the track. So anyways, there's a bit of EQ on this. I reduced the width, and the gain automation is here just to kind of bring it into being as the ambient piece starts. So let's listen to the chop on its own. Pretty simple, a little bit of fade in, fade out in the sampler. I used this OSR model for the filter and have a low pass going on here, cut off at 587 Hertz, some drive, resonance, and then within the controls, there's a transposition that I did to the audio clip. So instead of having it like this, I transposed it down. So just little experimental things you can do. And then with this LFO, I've altered the pitch slightly, so it's constantly warbling a little. The filter kind of moves around as well, and the sample pans a little bit back and forth to keep things interesting within the stereo field. And there's some random panning going on as well. So that one layer in and of itself has a little bit of interest to it, and then you just kind of keep building on top of that. So then there's this chicken, I labeled it as chicken grain, which is just this kind of a strange, like, I think of like almost a rubber chicken going but with a lot of reverb on it. It's like really atonal and doesn't really fit. There's definitely a bit of a clash in terms of the key content, I suppose, the tonality of the two. So it's always leaving you kind of on edge and unsettled, which if you put this low in a track, it can kind of give that tension if you need that. And then I found that within this region, there was a lot of interesting material, so I kind of boosted it and have auto panned it left and right. And then in this, I've grouped these two together because I wanted them to kind of be their own layer, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking of these two sounds as existing as one sound. And let's see, a little bit of width reduction on the utility, kind of gained some gain staging, EQing for this resonance that was within the chop. So I pulled that out. Transient shaper, that chop again was like the attack was too strong, and I pulled the sustain down because I wanted to add some delay later and wanted the I guess transient pieces to kind of hit that delay and pop around, as opposed to having like a long sustained piece that the delay wouldn't really do that same thing that it would do if you had that transient piece there. And then like a tremolo with this auto pan, so a volume automation basically that's not synced to the grid, so there's a lot of randomness to the evolution of the volume over time. Some more EQ because this is pretty low heavy. Some erosion, high-end content. Just add some shrillness to it, I suppose. A bunch of delay with like high feedback, and the dry wet's not super high, but it adds interest in the stereo field. Overdrive to kind of push things to the center in terms of frequency content, mid-range and highs, and pull some of the lows out a little, low heavy. And then this resonator thing, which really isn't doing a ton. I've got it pitched to basically what the root note of that chop would be at G2. The chop's like pretty warbled, and there's not really a super defined tonal center, I suppose, to it. That's overdrive, overkill. So it kind of cleans things up, I guess, in that way. And then what else do I have? Probably just, yeah, some tremolator. Again, not synced up in terms of, well, I had it with where it was like at 103 BPM or something like that, and the depth is really low. So again, you're getting some some volume automation that's occurring. Yeah, and there it goes. That's what happens with my effect rack. For some reason, it crashes my whole project. Let's open it up again. Anybody who's looking to stream, now that we're hanging out together with nothing to look at, check out this little voice meter guy. Cool application. And OBS, of course. No, I don't want to recover. And Microsoft has done a great job here with the background. The desktop is just gorgeous. That image will change automatically. Unbelievable. The future is now, everybody. We can even learn about this picture if we want. Okay. Nope. All right, so back at it. So we've gone through this atmosphere section here, and now we can get into the foley. So I've got this field recording right here. It's just a recording outside of the place that I'm staying at right now in a cold January night. Some cars going by, the wind's blowing, yada, yada, yada. It's a space, right? So you put it in alongside your sound, and you get kind of this realistic like a real environment with random sounds occurring here and there that keeps interest. I got a clipper on here for spots in the track like that come up like this. Right, like that's a huge peak, and this is a piece of audio that I'm not too concerned about conserving the dynamics of it. So that clipper should see it take action. Oh, that's strange. Usually it kicks in at that point. There it went that time. So anyway, so it's clipping that piece of audio and keeping things under control. And then there's a bunch of different effects built into this bus here. So a space modulator by Valhalla, frequency echo, just experimenting with different effects, a massive reverb because I wanted to wash this whole section out and just have it kind of in the background. And then some EQing and a compressor that I believe is linked to this bus here. So it ducks ever so slightly when that chop comes in. So hold on. So you're sort of injecting dynamics within this foley section here based off of the volume of the atmosphere bus. And then there are some percs, like a clap, which I think I just EQ'd a bunch, and this sweep sound, so let's listen to those. And again, it's running through that massive reverb. Be cautious if you're putting this into a whole mix, you will want to be cautious of the tails on your reverb and how wet you have things set, because that's an area where your mix can start to suffer if you're not paying attention, if you have a really long tail or like really, really heavy reverbs running at all times. It takes up a lot of space, so be cautious of that. Here's this little sweep thing. Again, atonal, doesn't really fit in, kind of gives you some movement and uncertainty alongside the main chop. And then there's one more element here. It's this distorted vocal. So it's a plugin by Bloom Vocal, or Excite Audio rather. It's called Bloom Vocal Ether, and I just saturated it to give it some character in the upper mids. And you know, there's a bunch of high frequency content in there as well, which is cool. And then a bunch of tape delay, some portal, of course, we love portal. Overdrive to focus on that upper area of the spectrum, and EQ to clean things up and dull the sound a little bit, because I guess it was a bit harsh before. So yeah, this alongside the foley, at least the January field recording, is sitting in the upper area of the frequency spectrum, and then the percs come in here and there. So these are kind of like our higher elements, and then this is like more mid-range, lower. So as you're designing an atmosphere like this, if you're thinking about, you should be thinking about where you're placing things in the frequency, like the spectrum, and giving space for each element. I'm not a master, I'm just, you know, an amateur producer, but hopefully that tip will help you guys as you're building your own tracks and ambiances and these types of things. And then there's a filter that I've put on the ambience bus here that just opens up ever so slowly. You could mess with the resonance on it, you could mess with like stereo width, delays, reverbs, opening and closing, and applying more or less of that particular effect, and just kind of going to town with things. And anyway, so there's some gain staging, a little more EQ, kind of leveling things out. And then I was like, well, I'll run it through some saturation, like a tape effect. So I saturated a bit, added some noise, a bit more flutter to kind of keep things warbling and moving and changing over time, and then drove it a little bit here to give it some more sonic content, harmonics, and another EQ because the saturation kind of muddied the low end a little bit or brought too much out. So, and then a kick to keep time, of course. So with something like this, you know, you could just freeze all of these tracks together if you wanted to and bounce it down, and then use that as just kind of an ambient section that it's a single clip that you bring in and out or chop as you please. You could change the timing of it. You could make it so that the whole of this clip repeats every, you know, instead of every bar or 2 bars, you could make it like 3/4 of a bar and then run that through. As I was saying at the start of this tutorial, I believe, you could add more automation in terms of filters or gain, or even like a phaser, whatever. Stuff like this that will keep things less static, especially when you have an atmosphere that you want evolving over time, but also keep it familiar enough that it's not going to kind of throw things out of place as you're listening back to it. So yeah, I hope that you guys learned something from this. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the comments box and I'll try to get to them. And yeah, take it easy.